And I'd like to start by saying welcome to everybody. My name is Adam Hosking. I'm Jacob's Global Director for Water Resources. It's a pleasure to join you for the first of our thought leadership sessions today on the subject of One Water Solutions, managing risks and unlocking opportunities. Jacobs is very proud to be a gold sponsor for Flood and Coast, and I've certainly been enjoying the conference so far, as I'm sure you all have. And indeed, a lot of the issues that have been raised over the last few days, and indeed in this morning's session as well, are issues that we'll touch upon here and really look at how a One Water approach might help us manage them as we go forward. This is the first of two thought leadership sessions we'll be leading as Jacobs this morning. Will be followed after the break by a session on adaptation pathways, which through the course of this session you'll hear a little bit more about, and we introducing them as potentially a vehicle that we can use to deliver One Water and integrated solutions. So moving to our agenda for today, we'll have three introductory presentations, and you can see our speakers on the panel below, each of which will spend about 10 minutes to tee up what I'm sure will then be an excellent discussion for the second half of this session. First of all, I'll give a few scene-setting remarks, and then I'll hand over to our panelists to make their presentations. We'll start with the River Severn Partnership, Integrated Catchment Solutions by Hayley Dayton, the West Midlands and River Severn Partnership Programme Manager from the Environment Agency. Then we'll hear about net zero and biodiversity net gain as a lens for integration. And we'll be hearing from our recently crowned inspirational person, Katie Bourne, Senior Associate Director of Environment at Jacobs. And then finally on digital transformation as an enabler from Katie Campbell, Digital Disruption Lead for Water and Environment at Jacobs. So just to start, throughout the conference, as I've just said, we've heard a lot about the array of challenges we face in flood and coastal risk management. And in doing that, and in hearing about those issues, we've really raised many of the connections and interdependencies that exist when we look at such pervasive issues as flooding and coastal risks. Water is increasingly recognised as a key metric in addressing both our climate and our biodiversity emergencies. And if we look across our catchments, we have many complex interlinked water challenges, such as flooding, water supply, water quality, the range of environmental outcomes that we're looking to support. And of course, those challenges are today recognised and understood to be exacerbated by not only climate change, but also by ongoing development that we see in our catchments. And these challenges are all, of course, linked through the water cycle. And we add to the complexity of managing these challenges through our governance and usage structures, illustrated in the bottom left here. These divide the water cycle into many parts, and our management is typically constrained by the remit and objectives, indeed the regulation of those agencies and stakeholders, and of course the resources available to them. So an approach that's being increasingly widely promoted across the water industry globally, and one that we at Jacobs are using to frame our approach to the water market as a whole, is this concept of One Water, recognising that water is a finite, precious resource that connects us across functions and across places. One Water for me really is simply about shared ownership in addressing the interconnected challenges that we face, and strongly believe that we must take a shared approach if we're to meet these ever-evolving challenges. I really like using this KVR, this knowledge, values, rules model that's on the screen here to illustrate what we're looking to achieve, to use One Water, to achieve. In order to adequately address the multiple, complex and changing challenges we face, we need an alignment of knowledge, values and rules. And here by knowledge, we're talking about the tools, the technologies, the infrastructure available to us to implement change and address these challenges. Values are our societal values that are open to, society that's open to promoting and indeed driving a need for change, accepting the changes inevitable needs to take place if we are to meet our present and future needs. And then of course we need rules. Rules is the governance and regulatory structures and processes that operate and really do provide some of those silos, unfortunately, at the moment within our water systems. And we need these rules to be flexible to enable change to occur, and don't simply look to stick to the status quo to maintain everything as it is today, because we know that's not really an option. If we need to look forward, we need to embrace change if we're going to meet these challenges. And so without the alignment of all three of these, we really can't become adaptive, we can't adapt, we can't become resilient to these evolving challenges. And so through our 3 presentations and then into our discussion, I really hope that you will see how we can use One Water and integrated thinking to really facilitate this approach to address risks and unlock opportunities. And so very quickly, before I hand over to Hayley, as we move into the discussion session after the 3 presentations, I would encourage you all to please use the question and answer panel on the right-hand side, post your questions, and I'll then, as we go into the session, I'll pick those up and post those to our presenters as we go forward. So with that, Hayley, I'd like to hand over to you.
Thank you, Adam. So I'm going to give you a quick tour of the River Severn Partnership, which is a strategic collaboration which is starting to take this kind of One Water approach that Adam's just outlined. Despite being in its early infancy, this collaboration of regulatory bodies, local authorities, infrastructure providers, academics, NGOs and others has gained significant momentum. It's unifying a wide range of partner organisations, and it's also gained significant ministerial support and investment. And this is all around driving a holistic, integrated approach to water management along Britain's longest river network, and that's the Severn catchment. Thanks, Adam. So we know climate change is high on the political and public agenda, but the challenges and the reality that we face locally are very real. Clearly, it's an environmental challenge here, but it has huge impact across people, places, the economy and the environment, and that's already very apparent in the Severn catchment. So you can see here that we've got land value of over 30 billion at high risk, over 250 kilometres of roads, and then direct impacts on over 100,000 jobs. And this, of course, only takes into account the kind of fluvial flood risk. This will be much higher and more significant when we look at flooding from all sources. So the picture is already one of significant challenge. And then we need to look at the kind of climate change, and some conservative projections here shows us some alarming water level increases, but also we're balancing that with some significant reductions in natural available flow by as early as 2050. Thanks, Adam. But with challenge, there comes opportunity. We're used to seeing major infrastructure items like roads and transport corridors be a means of driving productivity and creating growth corridors. So what about using a river system to do the same? There's long been a government commitment to accelerate and deliver more homes, infrastructure and jobs, and that's clearly exacerbated at the moment with current pressures around economic recovery. So we're seeing a huge acceleration around that agenda. Within that, though, the concept of sustainable growth has to go beyond environmental protection, and there's a significant role for water and water management in that. So it has a role as an asset in place shaping. It can drive the kind of whole resilience of places and be a key element in kind of how we make robust decision making going forward. Adding in that kind of economic recovery piece, water management and integrated water management in particular then has opportunity to deliver more productive and fair recovery, to deliver benefits for all, to accelerate the pace of delivery and to be a driver of innovation in places. Thanks, Adam. So based on these principles, the River Severn Partnership has emerged and now has a shared agenda and vision. And this is all about driving resilient and sustainable growth along Britain's longest river network, so recognising that unique asset and delivering a long-term programme of integration and innovation that brings together flood risk, water resource, water quality and environment management in whole. To do this, we are beginning to work on a shared problem statement, and this is all about how do we get everybody along the river to think and act in an integrated way. And the result of that, we hope, will be a bringing together of people to improve quality of life and natural resources through the way we manage land and water in the Severn Basin. Thanks, Adam. So as I've already mentioned, this all comes down to resilience. But for most partners, this actually does mean improved quality of life. And this has been a really interesting learning point for me as kind of program manager and working with a whole range of partners. Terms such as sustainability and resilient, we're used to them, but actually that's excluded some effective engagement locally with some of the key partners. So language is really important here around the kind of integration. I won't go through the points on this slide in detail with you, but the key bit here is that the partnership right from the beginning has taken a systems thinking approach. It's about that quality of life outcome and considering the role of water and environmental management to UK PLC growth and wellbeing. So we're moving away from single issue service delivery, such as flood risk management, into that integrated place-based delivery. Thanks, Adam. From this holistic integrated thinking then, the partnership now has an emerging work programme, and this is deliberately twin tracking long-term thinking and innovation with short-term testing and learning. So for the long term, we are an adaptive pathway pilot, which will bring together a shared decision-making framework. So that gives us the how are we going to do this, with a strategy, which gives us the what do we need to do, where and when. So those two together will provide the adaptive plan for the catchment up to 2100 and beyond. We're balancing that out then with a series of demonstrator programs. So this is a collection of no regret here and now projects that are thematically and kind of place-based. And that's where we can have that kind of test bed around this integration and adaptive thinking and shape the learning in that adaptive plan going forward. Thanks, Adam. I wanted to share this slide because I think it really is a useful summary on the kind of partnership and kind of idea of integration. And this is where we're looking at actually how we integrate provides our response to the challenges around adaptation. So you can see here, by working together to understand the different players, the needs, the ambitions across the catchment, that will enable us then to understand the sequencing of actions, the thresholds and the trigger points that are all needed. And that will then provide the basis for this collaborative adaptive planning framework that we're trying to bring forward. Thanks, Adam. So the kind of key bits from me, some of the challenges here and some of the lessons I've learned so far. This isn't easy, it's complex, and it requires us to act now whilst looking forward into the future. We also need to be fleet of foot, and from my perspective, that's really key about operating at the pace that our partners need us to, and that's a big challenge for regulatory bodies like the Environment Agency. The vision for integration doesn't always fit with our individual roles and responsibilities and our accountabilities, and so there are challenges there. And probably a key bit for me is not what are we going to work on together, but what control are we going to let go of in order for us to really do this collaboration and co-design that's needed. In that sense, this isn't just about a structural shift, it's a fundamental cultural shift. It's a way of thinking and acting, and therefore I see this as much a transformation programme as a strategic partnership. And to achieve that cultural shift is going to take time, and that poses challenges to huge political expectations on us to deliver in the short term. So how do you do that transformation when we need to deliver? Thank you, Adam. Final thoughts from me then. There are huge opportunities here and also huge benefits, and there's a significant appetite across a wide range of partner organisations to take this integrated approach. So the time is right, but it does need us all to think and act differently. I've heard quite a few of my colleagues talk about the River Severn partnership and refer to it as another partnership, and we've done partnerships and this is just on a bigger scale. And for me, that's fundamentally wrong. This isn't just about partnership working, it is about that different way of thinking and acting. We need to understand the role of water and environment in a wider system and consider who is involved in place leadership. That can then be used to drive a holistic approach to investment planning and decision making, in which water management actually becomes an enabler of improved quality of life. In doing so, it's really important to understand how places function, and that needs to drive the geography. And we need to be comfortable to start blurring boundaries between our individual organisational objectives so that we deliver on agreed outcome for a place rather than on our individual silos. Such an approach then will enable us to co-design the right processes that we need for how we're going to work together going forward. And that's really what the adaptive pathway thinking and the pilots are all about. Through this, we can build advocates across all the key actors in places, and that will span kind of political, strategic, operational and community level interest, and we need all of those. And this will require huge emphasis on engagement, and that's where I think the role of technology and innovation will be really key. final slide for me is just to pinpoint you to River Severn Partnership website for further information and some key contacts there. So, and I particularly point out Mark Barrow as the chair of the partnership, because I think it'd be useful to get this also from a local authority perspective. So please feel free to contact any of us on those details there.
Hayley, thank you very much for that. Fantastic. Great overview. Crammed an awful lot of information into a short space of time, so greatly appreciate it. So, I mean, so many points to take away. Remind folks to put your questions to Hayley and to our other panelists into the Q&A box. But clearly, you know, just thinking back to that knowledge value rules model. So all three of those elements come out really strongly there, Hayley, but I think particularly the rules and that takeaway point about what are you willing to give up ownership of and share, I think is a really important learning that we need to think about how we do that as we go forward. So thank you very much. Tees us up perfectly for the rest of the session. Really appreciate that. So next, I will hand over to Katie, and on behalf of all of us in the session, again, Katie, congratulations on your award at the Flood and Coast Excellence Awards last night. Richly deserved. Really pleased to have you as a colleague. I'm very happy to hand over to you now to talk us through delivering carbon and biodiversity ambitions.
Oh, well, thank you, Adam. Much appreciated. Yeah. Right. Well, Hayley shared how the River Severn Partnership Strategic Integrated Catchment wide infrastructure programme and focus on resilience were enablers for the sustainable economic growth and placemaking and lots of social benefits for the region. But we were wondering, is there another lens that we can look through that also enables cross-sector collaboration with such a diverse group that you get in a catchment? So the infrastructure providers, regulators and communities to deliver integrated water catchment management. So I'd propose yes. And that would be through ambitions that we all share, a common set of goals around addressing our climate emergency and biodiversity crisis, both of which are intricately linked. Could you pass on to the next slide, please, Adam? So the carbon and biodiversity are urgent goals that have real momentum building behind them now, and they are common ambitions across many sectors, aligned with national policy, and many have declared a climate emergency, have climate change strategies and carbon targets. Many have biodiversity goals through their environmental policies, and focusing on improving natural capital, ecosystem services and nature recovery. Also, those involved in delivering infrastructure projects will be needing planning permission. In England, we'll need to demonstrate biodiversity net gain soon with the changes to planning. So we are thinking that truly partnering can deliver shared ambitions, and these can deliver more. So as Adam said earlier, with that shared knowledge, vision, values and rules, they intersect to deliver resilient and highly adaptive solutions. So I've listed some of the key benefits of how this could deliver more. These will help address the many challenges that are facing us in achieving our ambitions, such as conflicting demands for land, the competition for restricted funding, and the skills and knowledge gaps that are amongst us, as well as trying to maximise that opportunity for delivering our ambitions on the ground efficiently and effectively. So this would bring together, for instance, each of the organisation's strengths, and for example, we may be able to purchase land together or use some landowners' estates and develop some long-term management and ownership that we couldn't do on our own. These will be delivering significant carbon sequestration and biodiversity benefits. So now I'll be sharing some of the innovative approaches that Jacobs have been taking on, working to advance knowledge in our industry about delivering carbon and biodiversity ambitions in a collaborative way. So next slide, please. So the first example here is taking a strategic regional review of the needs and opportunities for delivering net zero carbon. involving lots of stakeholders. We've designed this project for the Environment Agency in the northwest of England around the net zero carbon ambitions. So the Environment Agency set its ambition to become net zero by 2030, and that involves the primary goal of avoiding and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, such as from the construction and operation of the FCRM assets, and then offsetting any of the residual carbon. So we're delivering this novel methodology for taking a programmatic strategic approach to estimating that scale of carbon offsets that the Northwest programme might need to reach net zero, and to identify the most beneficial opportunities in the region for creating or enhancing habitat to sequester the carbon for those needs. So the method involves stakeholder-informed spatial analysis of natural capital GIS datasets, and will be generating a list of candidate habitat creation sites prioritized to meet wider objectives. And some of those objectives include abilities to promote partnership working and collaboration. So the two Environment Agency area boards in the Northwest have approved the funding for it, and with great enthusiasm. We're making progress on this. We hope to be reporting our findings in the summer later on. So the example mapping shown here is from the Broadlands Futures Initiative. Could be the sort of heat mapping that we use on this Northwest project around opportunities for increasing natural capital, and would support the decisions around protection and enhancement of areas of high natural capital and or indeed lower value areas to improve. So the key benefit from this project is around taking that strategic regional view of the best candidate habitat creation or enhancement sites, and to deliver the greatest benefits and efficiencies, potentially as large flagship sites in partnership with stakeholders around the catchments. So although the funding and legal mechanisms still have to be ironed out by the Environment Agency's national team around carbon offsetting approach, our study will be able to enable the Northwest team to act quickly when the national approach is announced next year. And also, in the meantime, it's helping warm up some potential partners who would be working with us, the Environment Agency, in delivering and securing habitat creation projects for carbon purposes or other purposes such as biodiversity net gain in the future. So a second innovative case study I'd like to share with you is on blue carbon and the opportunity that this could lead to in the future. Many of you will be aware that the Environment Agency has just published a review of 17 different carbon offsetting approaches, work they've done with Eunomia, and that set out the potential to remove or reduce carbon emissions. They found that most habitats could store carbon, but there's not been a consistent level of scientific evidence collated across all habitat types to know how much carbon is stored and how effective these habitats are at storing the carbon. So their offsetting review identified that salt marshes are really promising as a blue carbon prospect. They can typically store between 2 to 8 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per hectare per year. However, research by our partners at Manchester Metropolitan University suggests that potential for salt marshes to store carbon might be much greater than that, especially where sedimentation rates are high, such as in new salt marshes that have been created. So preliminary results from the Sturt Marshes Managed Realignment Scheme in Somerset, it's in the photos shown here, that suggests that storage rates of up to 30 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year shortly after restoration. So it's not known whether these high values are a one-off at Sturt or can be replicated in other salt marshes around the country. So we're working with Manchester Metropolitan University and the Environment Agency this summer, visiting 6 managed realignment sites across England to collect sediment data and Manchester Metropolitan University are going to do a thorough analysis to help us understand the variation in carbon content of salt marsh sediments across England. A second part of this study is really exciting, actually. We're looking at scoping up the elements of an existing United States coastal wetland carbon code to see whether that could apply to the salt marshes in the UK. So for this, Jacobs will be drawing on our knowledge as authors of the first carbon code for coastal wetlands in the US, and also bringing together our leading expertise in designing, building and monitoring managed realignment sites to create new salt marshes in the UK. So together, these two innovative studies for the Environment Agency in turn will help us establish whether UK salt marshes have a good potential to be used to offset carbon emissions. And in time, in the future, our industry could help develop a verified carbon methodology, carbon code for created salt marshes. And this in turn could encourage more managed realignment site and habitat creation schemes from many parties around the UK, including collaborative partnerships, which would deliver multiple benefits for the catchment management and biodiversity, and wider objectives around access, well-being, health for the local communities. So in conclusion, I think it's a very exciting time to be in a profession promoting low carbon, nature-based solutions. And we need to grab the opportunities that partnering can bring to delivering a one water approach to integrated catchment management, as well as delivering our shared carbon and biodiversity ambitions. Given the urgency of both the climate emergency and the biodiversity crisis, I'd be urging us to pursue these collaborations as quickly as we can. Thank you. Back to Adam.
Fantastic. Katie, thank you very much. Again, knowledge value rules all at play in what you're talking about here. And I think absolutely, these are such a common challenge and goals for us all to be working towards. That there really is great potential, I think, for us to use climate and biodiversity as a kind of a common language, even in terms of what we do as we go forward. I think it absolutely supports everything Hayley was saying. So thank you very much. We will now move forward, and Katie Campbell, I'll ask you to talk us through really a different approach on this, but really how digital might help facilitate this one water approach. Katie, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So yes, my name is Katie Campbell. I'm a fluvial geomorphologist by background, so I've been working in this kind of one water environment for the last 8.5 years. But over the last 1.5 years, I am the digital disruption lead for water and environment at Jacobs. And really what that's allowed me to do is start to think about how we can use the digital transformation piece to not only improve our offering, but our ways of working and the culture that Hayley touched on in her presentation. And so if we just move to the next slide, really what I wanted to start from is, what do we actually mean by digital transformation? It has several meanings, and that varies across industries and generations. And really at its simplest, digital transformation is concerned with embedding technology into business processes. However, I think that's quite a narrow view. And to really kind of move past the third industrial revolution and into the fourth industrial revolution, it's really about how we're using those technologies and making the kind of line blur between the physical, digital and biological spheres. And I think what's becoming more apparent is that technology is actually the enabler, and digital transformation is so much more complex than just the technology. It's about how we create value. It's about how we change how we lead things. It's about becoming agile, building collaborative environments and ecosystems. And it's about how we digitally enable ourselves to not only improve customer experience, but also the environment and how we interact and deal with it. And, it's fairly common knowledge that technology is part of everything we do. We use it in our personal lives, in our work lives, but we're all connected and things are becoming automated and linked. And really, I think the message about innovation and testing these two new technologies is really out there already. And Katie's just given us some great examples of that. But actually, what do we do with that? What do we do And how do we use digital transformation as an enabler? And based on kind of my definition and that I just gave you, I think it really gives us an opportunity to enable not only the use of technology, but a completely different way of working and thinking, and a way of protecting our environment. So on the next slide, I kind of want to look into what we actually mean by digital transformation. So for me, there's really kind of 4 core parts, and that's what we promote at Jacobs. So the first is about applying culture. So it's that customer-focused way of kind of really thinking about building the environment that people feel safe and enabled to challenge and work differently. The second is then the ways of working. So it's that lean, agile, collaborative, all of these kind of faster paced ways of working where we can try, test, fail quickly, and then carry on moving forwards. It's then about the business models, and this is probably something that we don't really talk about or think about a lot, but actually digital transformation means that we have to change how we do business. It becomes a lot more about the value driven rather than people's time, and that's a really big change that we need to think about. And then at the base of all of this fundamentally is data and technology. So it is data driven, it's automated, and it's really about how we use that information effectively in the internet era. And all 4 of these things transform the outcomes for ourselves and allows us to create disruptive services and products that are underpinned by that technology and data. So for me, the digital is how we do things, and the transformation is about the people. And really, it's about making people feel able and equipped to do it, and implementing that across our work with our clients and in our daily routines. And that raises loads of questions. Digital transformation is not easy. Nobody has the one answer. And often it's actually a bit alien to people. And how do we make them feel comfortable and confident to apply it? So if we look at the next slide, it's really asking, how do we use digital transformation as an enabler? Now, we have all these shiny drones and different things that we're doing at the moment. We've just landed the rover on Mars. Like, we are learning lots of different things from technology. But actually, if we don't embed that culture, structure, and the kind of process behind it, we really can't leverage digital transformation for One Water. And I think both Hayley and Katie have kind of raised that. So everyone always starts with that shiny technology, but actually, how do we make that industry-wide change? How do we get our individuals to challenge the business culture and really use that transformation as an enabler to let us move forward around the One Water concept? And it's really beyond looking at how we can use the technology, but actually challenge ourselves to use that information differently, communicate differently, think differently. And both Hayley and Katie have shown how we're using that technology to kind of challenge that status quo. And really, that's what I think digital transformation is in terms of being an enabler for One Water. And so the next few slides, we're going to kind of look at that. So originally and fundamentally, I wanted to explore how the digital transformation is an enabler for One Water. And at the very core of this is that foundation platform. It is using the technology to be able to create a platform or a data hub or a way of sharing that information. And that's really enables you to then build up that picture of One Water so that we can collect the data effectively, but we can also do so in the context of the catchment. And in Hayley's example, they built a benefits toolkit, and that's what they've used as their foundation platform. And Katie also mentioned how they're using that through the carbon net zero, creating that platform of that data. And that allows us to really support the integration of real-time reporting and understand what we're doing. But beyond this, we have other elements as well. So we can combine technology and the cultural shift to start thinking about how we can work differently. And one of the big challenges is, how do we innovate around, net zero, as Katie was talking about? And how do we take things that we're doing in other industries and use those as part of our One Water challenge? So on the left there, we have our travel optimization tool. And this started as a way of focusing about how we get children to school more efficiently. But when we sat down with our wider environmental team and really thought about the innovation itself, we can link that to fuel consumption, carbon, water use in individual households and at school. And we can actually take that challenge and use that information to think about the wider catchment and put that at the heart of our challenge. So we're creating innovative technologies that we're using in certain industries, but that also benefits us in One Water. We can think about data collection, drones, the use of satellite imagery, 3D cameras, that's not new, but it actually enables to see the catchment and the water use and understand the biodiversity in a different way. And one of our teams actually raised an innovation new idea that we're currently funding, where they actually questioned the use of leveraging photos taken in real time. You know, we have people living in these catchments on a daily basis, experiencing them, understanding the actual problems, and they can take photos and share that information live. We can really build up our data set and our understanding and actually really support the idea of how we can help others in tackling the One Water challenge. And then it thinks about the data collection. How can we make this feedback loop real time? We have a team in Canada who've done just this. They collect water quality data from remote catchments, they process it, and it's in the hands of their clients within a matter of hours. And what that actually enables them to do is fundamentally think about how to manage their water and environment with that data-driven confidence. And that's really, really important when it comes to actually using digital transformation as an enabler. And so if we go to the next slide, we can take this a step further. We can think about the analytics and the artificial intelligence that can start to learn from the information we're collecting and the patterns that we're seeing. And that allows us to become more reactive rather than less reactive and more proactive in how we manage water and environment. And beyond this, we can actually get our stakeholders involved. And I think Hayley touched on this. We can use a kind of more collaborative and a personal interface by using technology. And the example on the left here is our virtual event space. And Jacobs have created an environment where we can share and promote events that don't have to be in person. And when we're in situations like we are now, where we can't be in person with one another, that actually really allows people to get more involved and still be involved. And it also lets us go beyond just the typical audiences we would have reached before. And we can start to break down the barriers using digital transformation. And the digital being the enabler to get stakeholders involved, it allows us then to really feed into that One Water cycle. And gaining more data and more information, but also getting stakeholders to help make decisions, is really allowed us to improve that catchment understanding. And it's about co-working beyond just those key parties and sharing and working with those who really are affected by the One Water vision. And that again really allows us to put ourselves in the right place and the right shoes, as Hayley and Katie have both touched on. And the technology is just the foundation and the enabler, but that transformation piece about how we use it, how we innovate, how we think differently, how we get people to think differently is really core to that. And so my final slide is just to kind of wrap up. So really digital transformation can help us drive that business case development and investment. It goes beyond just the technology, and it's about that process of getting there, changing our workforce to think differently, building that culture where innovation is considered normal, and where we can really process this outlet to achieve this. And the key is to really have a healthy relationship with failure. And a big part of digital transformation is knowing that actually these are new ways of working. Not everybody is confident in them, and we are going to have to try things new, and sometimes it will fail. But actually we can really learn from that, and we can learn quickly. And it's encouraging that environment to really foster that and challenge it to allow us to learn and change and be different and think differently that's really at the heart of digital transformation. And, you know, the industry as a whole is really running at kind of full pace at One Water and carbon net zero and all of these amazing environmental challenges that we know that we need to address. And digital transformation enables us to do that. It allows us to create more value and better benefits and continue on that journey to meeting the sustainability environmental challenges that we're all facing.
Brilliant. Katie, trying to find the unmute button. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, lots to sort of get our heads around there, I think, in terms of really challenging us in terms of how we interact with digital, how we think about digital and everything it can do for us to support so much of what we talked about. You know, I guess, yeah, in theory, in coming back to my KVR model, this is the knowledge piece, but it's so much more than knowledge. It's absolutely, you know, driving values and rules in terms of how we do this. So fantastic. Thank you, all three. So we'll now move into our discussion. Thank you very much for the questions that are coming in. We did, of course, have a few canned questions, but you've all been putting in some brilliant questions. So I'm going to jump straight into those. Please do keep adding them, and please do vote up questions as you see them as well. So, Katie Campbell, I'll give you a moment. Have a look at the questions. The top voted one is for you, but I'll come back to you, give you a moment to breathe. And Hayley, I'll start with you. So questions coming from Alice John's, apologies, around the role. What role do you see regulators playing, or that they should play, to enable more partnerships like the River Severn Partnership to form? And I think, and Katie, I'll come to you as well in terms of how the role you would anticipate regulators from your perspectives as well. But Hayley, if you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah. So I think this goes back probably to my point on challenge around cultural shift. So I think regulatory bodies have got a huge role to play here, and obviously I sit in the Environment Agency, and that's where there's quite a shift, I think, in particularly thinking about that national flood risk management strategy and the kind of direction of travel in there. How do we kind of start now heading and facing into that? So for us, obviously, we cover kind of national remit. So we're the one organisation that geographically can enable a lot of this. So that puts us in a good place. We've got a lot of technical evidence and data, and that's really key to be able to kind of play that then into those partner organisations to kind of understand, or help them understand, why should they be interested in this? What role have they got to play? And therefore, how do we start coming together? I suppose that the kind of key bit, though, is that the vision of integration is kind of out of step with the processes. And I'm seeing this really firsthand at the moment around that adaptive pathways pilot. So that's a DEFRA initiative. The money and the investment therefore comes down through DEFRA into the Environment Agency, and the accountability assurance or the business case processes sit with EA. How do we manage that element of it, the processy bit, with actually this is about collaboration, and that we need to move from what I call probably more consultative collaboration, where we go out and talk to people around what we're doing, into true co-design. And that's the point around letting go of control a bit. Don't let those processes stop that true collaboration and kind of co-design. So yeah, back to the question, enormous role for the regulatory bodies to play. And I think kind of one of the bits I'm taking away at the moment is actually, in my role, how do I get some of these big strategic partnerships working together? We're stronger together. So although I can represent the Severn, actually there's the Humber, there's the Thames, there's Yorkshire, and we probably should come together as a network of one strategic collaboration and have one voice around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So just a quick reminder for everybody picking up on the adaptation pathways. At midday, we have another thought leadership session focused exclusively on adaptation pathways and the role that they can play going forward, that Amy Bentley will be leading. So please do tune in for that one. But yeah, Katie Bourne, maybe we'll come to you first. On that point, I think, given how much everybody, no matter who they're regulated by and their remit, is affected by biodiversity and climate change, as you talked about. Can you see how that view, that lens you talked about, can help us perhaps with that engagement with regulators to try and move them forward?
Yes, I think that is a great way to look at it, the opportunities to share goals and ambitions that can be delivered through the collaboration. As you said earlier, Adam, this is common language. Biodiversity and carbon are top of a lot of people's agendas now, including the regulators. So this is an opportunity to bring everyone together for those shared ambitions. They do have to be aligned, though, and as Hayley said, there's lots of procedural and governance issues that come across. We have to get around those somehow to deliver the greater good, and setting up those shared outcomes, and really buying into what the benefits of the collaboration and integrated catchment management, the One Water, will be key. But a good way in would be trying to address the climate emergency and biodiversity crisis together, and the momentum and the urgency that's around all that that's needed. I just, by the way, just got a message from Katie Campbell saying that she can't hear us so well. I hope other people can.
Yeah, hopefully everybody else can. I can. I don't know, Katie Campbell, are you with us? Can you? Katie
No.
Campbell not hearing. So we'll try and come back to you. Katie Campbell, give us a wave when you can hear us. So yeah, I was going to ask, obviously, the role of digital in engaging with regulators and getting everybody on a common platform and so on and so forth. So, but we will move forward, and I will certainly be saving Adam Broadhead your big data question for Katie Kay when she comes back with us. I think continuing.
Oh, she could. Sorry, Adam. She can hear other people. It's you as the moderator. She can't hear. We've had that issue before in Hopin.
Sorry, Adam.
I won't take it personally. Katie, well, we'll come back to big data. So I'll pick up on another question which is coming around the point. Actually, I picked up, Hayley, in your presentation around giving up control. I think this is again one for all of you. Can you just explain a little bit more about what you mean by determining what control you want stakeholders, those engaged, to give up?
Yeah, I think this is around the point of that kind of shared agenda, and that we are kind of, although we all represent individual organisations and we have those processes, governance and objectives all to meet, some of which are statutory, that actually this is about a kind of a shared goal here, and some significant challenges that no one organisation can address. So that kind of unifying bit, doing nothing and doing it alone is really not an option as kind of we've come together. But that's different. That takes us out of our comfort zone in many ways, and we're kind of probably more comfortable kind of working jointly as opposed to actually stopping doing probably what we've traditionally always done and had responsibility for. And but there is an appetite, I think, for others to kind of want to step into that space, and this is where I was kind of alluding to that kind of marriage between the kind of political, the strategic, the operational, and the community is really important here, and to get that element of it going. So and this is where, from a Rivers and Partnership point of view, we are starting to ask ourselves questions around, actually, does it need to become its own entity in order to bring those different organisation and those responsibilities together into that kind of unified way? So that's something we are starting to explore.
And Katie, Bourne, for
yes.
you, do you, I mean, in terms of that giving up or taking on ownership of certain things, how do you see that playing out in relation to, I guess, specifically perhaps biodiversity?
Yes, well, I think there are lots of challenges we've yet to really identify, the sort of liabilities that potentially we are going to be getting around properly managing and securing these biodiversity sites, particularly for biodiversity net gain, to make sure that they are counted in a way under the planning rules and are on the register. There's going to be developed. There's lots of requirements around long-term maintenance, management of those sites, and if you have collaborative projects, that can really help with the shared knowledge and skills and expertise that some groups have around that. But there's also the liabilities around land ownership, and when we have very short-term budgeting for maintenance and management, operations, and changes over of leadership, and it's very difficult to be able to actually get that buy-in for such long-term commitments. But that is what's needed for biodiversity and carbon offsetting for sequestration sites as well. So we need to help address these governance and control issues, and they're difficult, but we must get around them.
So I'm going to ask you to please be my assistant moderator,
Yes.
Katie Bourne. Can you, Katie Campbell, just to, I think, her thoughts in terms of how digital might help facilitate some of that sharing of ownership. People can engage through just a digital view on that question of ownership.
Yeah. So Katie Campbell, a question around how can the digital transformation help us with agreeing and getting that shared ownership and collaboration?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me, Katie. But yeah, so I think it's really about how we think about the use of that technology, and it's really about how we create an environment where people can communicate that isn't, in an office or in a location that we used to be, particularly now, like pulling off of Hayley's point, the fact that we need a wide range of businesses and stakeholders and teams to be involved in that. I think digital transformation can provide that platform and space to do so, and I think it's a really important opportunity to leverage it to get that buy-in and get that engagement. And I think I saw a question that someone raised again about big data as well. So the information that we're collecting is vital, but you are right, big data also has a carbon implication, and it's not just collecting data for data's sake, but making sure that it's very specific and controlled, and we understand why we're doing it and what we're trying to get out of it. And I think often with One Water in general and all of these challenges we face, that vision and having that really set goal and how we're going to do that is really important. And then digital transformation helps to build from that.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. So moving on, actually a great question, actually a couple of questions that have come in. One from Steve Barge around citizen science, and then one which is anonymous around the value of community inputs. And so Steve's question is around, and back to the knowledge and values piece of this model, I think, so Steve asks, do we think that with citizen science and community and activist group pressure that actually the kind of the rules piece starts to diminish in value, because actually it's about values, it's about values driving what we do. And so do we see that being a shift into the future potentially, that actually it's more about what the people want as opposed to what governance structures tell us we need to do? But then on the flip side of that, the questions coming around, a concern over the value that's placed on community and voluntary input, as opposed to the so-called the value placed on so-called experts' input and that guidance that comes perhaps more through that rules structure. So I guess your thoughts, Hayley, you're sort of living it with Severn Partnership at the moment, and I think Katie, you're seeing it absolutely, both Katie Bourne and Kemble, in terms of how we're seeing things shift. Just your perspectives on that, on really the importance and value of the kind of bottom-up community engagement as opposed to that kind of broader structure that we have, and whether you see that changing in the future, given Extinction Rebellion and all those other bottom-up campaigns that are really making a difference at the moment. Is that going to drive us more in the future, or are we going to continue to have to work with regulators, governance structures and such like to make this happen? So maybe Hayley, big question, lots to go with, I apologise, but just really open to your thoughts on that. I think it's a really interesting idea.
Well, I'm obviously in the thick of it at the moment, and I think I'm already seeing a bit of a shift. And I think that appetite piece, and when I said, the time's now, so, and part of, I suppose, the driver for me around the River Severn Partnership is it's a place where there's a meeting of that kind of top-down with the bottom up, and you need a place for that, and we don't have a place for that right now. So that was the whole point of the partnership, is to provide that mechanism for, because you need both. Neither, going back to my point around no one person, no one organization can do this. So, and I'm seeing kind of, certainly from a River Severn Partnership point of view, those demonstrators I mentioned around the kind of here and now, there's a lot of kind of bottom up kind of community drivers in there. So we've got some enabling work streams. So whilst the top down, we've got investment and we've got flood risk projects and water resource projects that we need to kind of get on the ground, none of that will happen without people who own the land. And so those key enabling pieces of work there are around how do we do engagement across the piece around land ownership, and then what are the kind of financial models and things that will then make that actually a viable business proposition. And that's actually being driven by estate owners on the ground, who have kind of convened a group of landowners and interested parties to drive that forward and kind of develop kind of like almost like some farm cluster type work. So it's very much, I think, this kind of framework to enable both of that kind of, we need the top down, we need the policy, we need the investment, we need the kind of planning piece, but you also need the people on the ground.
Yeah, and I think the investment was a key word there as well, right? The money needs to be there to do this, and that doesn't necessarily always come from the citizen groups. So, but they do influence, certainly. Thank you. So, Katie, Paul.
Yeah, I would propose that yes, we are seeing a shift, and more well-organised local groups that are wanting to get heavily involved in the projects and helping with us with our more strategic thinking. And I just think we need to be very aware of some respects the fairness, the equality, and the burden that we might be giving certain groups. There's a lot that would be very keen to be involved, and our engagement and stakeholder exercises and getting buy-in to the projects needs to really think very carefully about what we're asking of the communities, and targeting things in a efficient way, so that people understand what sort of decisions they're able to be helping with, where they can get involved, how they can get involved, and to make sure that's as fair and equitable across the groups as we can, by understanding who's in the community and who are the stakeholders. And I know also there's some communities that are willing to get heavily involved in ownership and management of some of the projects and the studies, and learning about their catchments as they're helping with the science as well. So there's real opportunities for them and for volunteers. But yeah, again, thinking about how that can be done fairly and equitably, and the most deprived areas are often where we're working as well. So how can we make sure that we're not adding burdens and we're actually really benefiting those communities with the projects?
Yeah, brilliant point. Thank you. Equity is such a challenge and such a high-profile issue that we absolutely need to be integrating this into everything we do. So, great point. Again, would you mind deputising and just, I think, again, the role of digital, Katie talked about citizen science already, but the role of digital in this, in bringing people's voices in alongside our sort of regulatory.
So, Katie, what's the role of digital to be bringing together? Oh, I've forgotten it now. What was it? Sorry, Katie. The role of digital in bringing together the different groups, the communities, in alongside with the experts, and how we make sure that's working equitably.
Yeah, and I think kind of building off of what you said before, Katie, that inclusion and diversity piece is really big. And I think kind of digital transformation and the use of technology kind of helps to start to enable that, because we can provide platforms where it isn't just one person making a decision that then filters down eventually to everybody that's then going to be affected by it. We can actually put users at the heart of those decisions. And, there's loads of ways of sharing information and that kind of using technology to do that. But it's also about changing our kind of a way that we're approaching this. And I think, Hayley, you raised it a few times, in that instead of just making a decision about a vision, you can actually share that and build that way of working and the culture around it, and then use kind of technology to help. I mean, even this conference, I think, is a great example of that. LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all of these things are an example of a digital transformation in action. They are things that we are using to share our message in a really quick and effective way that allows people to have an opinion and to provide feedback. And we might not always like what people are saying, but actually that's part of it, isn't it? You need diversity of thought and view to really help us progress with how we are really tackling these. And I think that plays off of what both Hayley and Katie were saying there.
Fantastic. Thank you. We're very close to the end of our time. I want to be respectful of folks' need to go and grab a coffee before we dive into adaptation pathways. And before we go, with apologies to those of you whose questions I haven't managed to pitch, I will ask the three of you, please, just to give us a closing thought. I think it's been a great discussion, lots of ground covered, lots of really good experience, I think, and thoughts as to how this goes forward. But just close with asking each of you to give us one thing that you would change now in order to really help us deliver integrated approaches to deliver One Water as we go forward. So if you could flip a switch and change one thing now, what would it be? So maybe again, Hayley, I'll come to you first.
Okay, so wearing my regulatory hat, I think I would be saying to the regulator, be bold, and that it's okay to let go a little bit. So I think there's real learning to take at the moment, particularly from local authorities in the kind of COVID recovery phase. They are really taking that kind of be bold approach and trying things, because to be honest, we have to. Yeah. And I don't think the regulatory bodies are in a different position with that.
Fantastic, thank you. Katie Bourne, and then I'll ask you to pose the question to other Katie.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, the one thing I would change is to increase the pace of change. I know we feel like things are changing fast at the moment, but actually there is the climate emergency and biodiversity crisis. So we just need to get on and actually deliver some of these integrated catchment management plans and biodiversity, habitat creation, carbon sequestration sites, and work out the sort of the governance and the paperworky side of things later on. I think we just need to crack on and get going.
Super, thank you.
And over to Katie, what's the one thing you would change to make this all happen?
I think yours is really good, Katie. Mine would be our relationship with failure. I think we need to accept that we're not always going to succeed. Not everything's going to look how it should look. Not everything's going to work exactly how we planned. And I think sometimes we panic about that. And so we don't do things, or we're really risk adverse. But actually, sometimes you just kind of have to accept it, try it, move on and learn. And I think that's probably my one.
Fantastic. Three great takeaways. Be bold, act quicker, don't be afraid. I think it's fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody. We're a little over time. Thank you ever so much, Hayley, Katie, and Katie. That's been fantastic. Hopefully everybody has taken lots from this session. It's been great. Please do now go enjoy your break. Tune back in 13 minutes for Adaptation Pathways. And just to close, to say thank you to SciWIM and the Environment Agency and the organisers of Flood and Coast. And we'll speak again soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.